Good morning and welcome to worship with the community of the First Parish in Lincoln. We are glad to see you today on Zoom. We are especially glad to welcome Reverend Kit and Reverend Nate to lead us in worship today. Thanks to both for their presence while recovering from COVID and taking care of a sick child. That certainly isn't easy, and we are grateful to them for their willingness to be with us today virtually. We look forward to the brief Q&A with them after a short postlude at the end of the service. Our roots as a church go back to the 1740s, and our present community was formed in 1942 by the coming together of the Congregational and Unitarian churches in town. We try to be welcoming and inclusive and encompass a wide range of theological and spiritual beliefs. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever you carry with you in your heart, please know that you are very welcome with us today. We invite you to put your prayers in the chat, and we will read them during our community prayer time. The flowers today are given by Alice de Normandy to celebrate all the mothers of our world and also warmly welcome Reverends Kit and Nate to our FPL community.
Thank you, Katie, and hello, First Parish Lincoln. It's so good to see your faces on our screen this morning. And of course, this is not the way we had wanted to start out our candidating week and make our first impression with you all, but we're here today and it's really good to be together.
As we move towards a spirit of worship, we want to just extend deep gratitude to all of the lay leaders and staff who met us with flexibility and compassion this week and helped make this morning happen. So let us worship together, saying together our opening words from Psalm 98. Oh, sing a new song to the eternal.
Shout praise all earth, break into music and song.
Praise the eternal with lyre and song.
Let the sea and all within it thunder praise, the world and its inhabitants.
Let rivers clap their hands, let mountains sing in chorus. Oh, sing a new song to the eternal. And now let us sing wherever we are, at whatever volume your soul is at this morning.
And now would you join me in a spirit of prayer? God of becoming, we gather in joyful celebration of this long-awaited day. We give thanks for all those who have offered their loving efforts to bring Reverends Nate and Kit to us this morning, and we give thanks for the community we are becoming through your grace in these uncertain times. Yet sometimes we wonder how to praise in a world that seems so fragile. Wars and climate catastrophes and unjust laws that threaten bodily autonomy can topple lives in an instant. Bodies made for connection, play, and rest are riddled with anxiety about how to survive in systems of oppression. Still, we gather. Still, we long to celebrate that which brings us joy, like this moment together. And we long to worship what is good. In this paradox of life, guide us with your radical love, we pray. Enliven our imagination that we may partner with you and partner with one another to unfold the dream of communal flourishing. Amen.
Please join us as we say our covenant.
In the love of truth and in the spirit of Jesus, we unite for the worship of God and the service of all.
Hi, everybody. This is a moment for all ages. My name is Kit, and this is Zoe. And we want to talk to you a little bit about Mother's Day and flowers and what are these? Bees
And unicorns.
and unicorns. So happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, or anybody who's celebrating mothering love in all its forms. I bet a lot of you got something like these today, right? What are these, Zoe?
Flowers.
Flowers. These are some beautiful tulips I got this week that have been cheering me up because it's been a tough week for us, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened to our household this week?
We got COVID.
We got COVID, yeah, and I'm thinking about all the people out there who've had COVID. Have any of you out there have had COVID these last couple years? Yeah, I'm really sorry. I can relate in a new way to how hard that's been. But we're okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things we've been saying all week is we say, we're okay. And then it forces us to take a deep breath. We're okay. So back to Mother's Day. So a lot of people got flowers, I bet, this weekend. But I wondered, what if people gave a mother a hive of bees for Mother's Day? Bzzz. They might be a little bit surprised. Well, why would they be surprised? Bees are wonderful. Well, hello, Mr. Bumblebee. How are you today? Oh, bzzz. I'm okay, but people are always sort of scared of me. Bzzz. But I'm helpful. Bzzz. Well, that's right. We really need you, don't we, Bumblebee? Bzz, 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 bzz. That's right. Me and the flower, we're partners. We're friends. Really? Yeah, just because the flowers are so beautiful doesn't mean I'm not important too, you know. See, we go together like peanut butter and jelly. You do? Bzz, bzz, bzz. Uh-huh. Because I drink some nectar, but then I get some pollen on my feet and my body, bzz, 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 bzz. And then I bring that pollen over onto other flowers, and I help the flowers create seeds and keep growing. So you see, me and the flowers are partners. We need each other. It's called a mutual relationship. A mutual relationship? Wow. Or a symbiotic relationship. That means the flowers help me and I help the flowers. Wow. Well, that sounds like a cool idea, especially on Mother's Day weekend, to think about partnerships and love as being relationships where we both help each other be our best selves and grow.
Happy Mother's Day.
And happy Mother's Day. And who do you have here, Zoe?
This is a unicorn that's named Pinky, and this is a unicorn that's named Purpley.
And are those unicorns friends and partners?
Yeah.
And they help each other? Let's see them one more time. Lift it up. Well, isn't that wonderful? Well, I wondered if you all out there would join me in a moment of, in the spirit of prayer or in a moment of meditation. Let's all take a deep breath and say we're okay. Yeah. Holy Spirit of love, we thank you so much for all the mothers and others in our lives who have nurtured us and helped us grow and cross-pollinate and fly around in our lives.
And happy Mother's Day.
And happy Mother's Day. Thanks so much, everybody. Amen. And see you soon. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bzz, bzz, bzz.
Goodbye.
So I think we're moving to our first reading now, and it feels more than appropriate after the week we've had as a nation that both our readings today should feature the voices of strong women. Our first reading is a short poem by Gwendolyn Brooks, who was an African-American poet who spent most of her life in Chicago. Brooks titled this poem Paul Robeson, and it's dedicated to that singer and actor and activist. And as much as the poem is captivated by Robeson's voice, it's also focused on what that voice symbolizes, the possibility of situation-changing, life-changing solidarity and partnership that was as necessary in Brooks's time as it is in our own. So I think we're ready for that slide if we want to share that. And this is Paul Robeson. That time we all heard it, cool and clear, cutting across the hot grit of the day. The major voice, the adult voice, foregoing rolling river, foregoing tearful tale of bale and barge and other symptoms of an old despond. Warning, in music words, devout and large, that we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond.
We come now to the time in our service which we set aside for silent and spoken prayer. To prepare ourselves, remaining muted, we will sing the prayer hymn, Mothering God. Following the hymn, we will take 1 minute for silent prayer, meditation, and reflection, followed by a time for spoken prayers from the congregation. Please put your prayers, in the chat. Thanks. From Larry and Kim Buell, please send healing love to Don Bean Fang, who is at the Brigham. From Sarah Andresiak, on Mother's Day, may we celebrate the generative and creative force of all women through motherhood and all endeavors. And may women always have choice about how and when to use their voice. From Jennifer and Richard Saffron, prayers, expression of joy. Today is our 40th anniversary. From Ruth Ann Hendrickson, prayers for Sarah Kay, who carries on in spite of the fatigue of long COVID. She does so much for this church community. From Linda Hammett Ori, prayers of gratitude for this special community of Lincoln as we prepare to welcome the newest members, our new ministers, and their family. From Rosemary Lloyd, a prayer for our community. May we be more loving, inclusive, and strong than all that would divide us. From Jen Morris, a prayer of hope and gratitude for my son Aaron, who is recovering from COVID in California. We lift up these prayers of our community, both those that have been spoken aloud and those that have been held in the silence of our hearts. Dear Lord, today on Mother's Day, I give thanks for all of the mothers in our lives and in our communities. I hold those new to motherhood, those with many years of experience, those who have experienced or are experiencing loss, those who wish for motherhood, and those who do not want motherhood in my heart. As I reflect on my own experience, I pray for the strength to remember the joy during the difficult times. I pray for the ability to fully experience the joy during the joyful times. I pray for the reminder to be present, truly present, with my children, especially when the pace of the world tries to pull me away. And finally, I give abundant thanks for the community that supports me as a mother. Amen. Please join me if you wish in saying the unison prayer that appears on your screen, remaining muted. Eternal Spirit, Earth Maker, Pain Bearer, Life Giver, Source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God in whom is heaven, the hallowing of your name echo through the universe. The way of your justice be followed by the peoples of the world. Your heavenly will be done by all created beings. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and come on earth. With the bread we need for today, feed us. In the hurts we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and test, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For you reign in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen. We come now to the time for this morning's offering. You can support First Parish in Lincoln by going to fpllincoln.org/donate or scanning the QR code that will appear on your screen shortly. You can also mail your contribution to the First Parish Lincoln, Box 6218, or 14 Bedford Road in Lincoln, Mass. 01773. Dear Lord, we give thanks for both these gifts and the givers, and we ask that we may use these gifts wisely and well, both to nurture the life of this congregation and to further the goals of justice and peace throughout the world. Amen.
Amen. Friends, our second reading this morning comes from the Hebrew Bible, the book of Ruth, one of my favorite passages. Comes from Ruth chapter 1, verses 11 through 18. Let us listen together for the Spirit to speak. But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters. It has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me and more as well, even if death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her.
Have you ever had a sentence addressed to you, and as the words are being spoken, you realize that nobody has really said that exact thing to you before in your life? Back in my first year of fatherhood, I was in line to check out at CVS. I had my daughter Zoe in a stroller fast asleep. And all of a sudden, the cashier looked up and sort of absentmindedly said, "You're next, Dad." I started to look over my shoulder. Surely the cashier was addressing somebody else, and then I realized it was me. I was Dad. Here's one sentence that I bet Naomi has never heard before in her life. Where you go, I will go. For Naomi, as for so many immigrants and refugees, upheaval and abandonment, they weren't the exception in her life, they were the norm. When Naomi was a young mother, a famine visited her homeland of Judah. There was nothing to eat, and the entire future that she had envisioned vanished. So Naomi and her husband had to take a dangerous trip to a strange land called Moab. And though she made a home there, it wasn't where she belonged. There were nuances in the dialect that took her a while to pick up on, different weather, different food, different music. And finally, just as she'd begun to settle in, Elimelech, her husband, died. Still, Naomi managed 10 years in that foreign land as a widow. Then her 2 sons passed away. And so you can hardly blame Naomi, I think, for doing the world's biggest double take when on her journey back to Judah, she hears these words from her daughter-in-law. "I am not leaving you Naomi thinks she's about to release Ruth and Orpah. After all, they're from Moab, not Israel, where she's headed. And Naomi is an older single woman, no roots left anywhere, about the lowest rung on society. Why would anyone cast their lot with her? Surely Ruth and Orpah are just being polite, right, by accompanying her this far, Naomi thinks. They've probably been waiting for their chance to be let go, and now they'll slip away. And Orpah, you can tell she's genuinely sorry, but she does. She slips away. But Ruth decides on something different. And it takes her a few tries before she can actually get across her decision to Naomi. Finally, in our passage today, she just kind of blurts it out. Don't you get it? Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. I am not leaving you. This is a partnership. In most of the books of the Hebrew Bible, God is not so hard to find. What I mean is the Jewish deity, often called Elohim, is actually a character in the text itself. Elohim says things, Elohim does things. He walks around the garden in the book of Genesis. Later on, he conjures up a great flood. But our reading, the book of Ruth, is very different. For in this book, Elohim does not speak as an individual character. God never intervenes directly. See, here it's as if the Spirit of life is suggesting that to understand who I am, to appreciate my presence in your life, all you need to do is to pay attention to everything that's contained in the relationship between these two women. Pay attention to the amount of uncredited labor they have done to raise their children, work that we celebrate on this Mother's Day. Pay attention to the grief that binds them together, all they have suffered through. Pay attention to the joy they find in the small moments of life. And maybe most of all, pay attention to this incredible decision that Ruth makes to put compassion before ethnicity, before geography, before religious identity even. For it's one thing, right, to remain faithful to the folks you are supposed to be loyal to, your family, your neighborhood, your country. But in a time of crisis, after a famine or during a pandemic or in the midst of an extended climate emergency, maybe mere loyalty is not enough. In times like these, in times like ours, maybe we need a love that crosses boundaries. Maybe we need a love that works harder than loyalty. Maybe we need a love that suggests what Gwendolyn Brooks argues in her poem that, quote, we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. When Kit and I began to talk about applying as co-pastors for the settled minister position at First Parish Lincoln, we noticed right away that we would not be the first partnership in this congregation's history. As your church website puts it, First Parish was born on May 25th, 1942, when, quote, the Congregational Parish and the Unitarian Congregational Society simultaneously voted themselves out of existence and into the framework of First Parish in Lincoln. And it's worth lingering, I think, for a minute on the process that led to this partnership. As your history puts it, the union between the two churches was first considered decades earlier, way back in the 1920s when the two churches worshiped together in the summer. Finally, in 1935, there was a trial federation of the two churches under the direction of 4 leaders from each congregation. As a history buff, I would love to go back and be a fly on the wall during some of those first meetings between the two church representatives. because I imagine that the two congregations' initial discernments must have resembled Ruth's discernment in some ways, as she was deciding whether or not to merge her future with Naomi's. If she was at all like me, I think Ruth probably focused at first on everything she was frightened of with this change. What would I be giving up? What would I be missing out on if I left my life behind in Moab? And likewise, the two churches that stand behind First Parish Lincoln must have begun their discernment with all sorts of questions rooted in doubts and fears about such a change. What will happen to our beloved traditions? What about our two different church buildings? What if we don't like each other all that much? But I imagine after a while, just as the considerations started changing for Ruth, that the questions started changing for these church leaders. And as the congregations began to appreciate all that they could do together, all that they had in common, yes, but even more than that, all that their differences could contribute to fostering a vibrant spiritual community, I wonder if the conversation shifted. I wonder if they began to ask questions like, how much more might we be able to offer if we joined forces? How might we reach more people? How might we better serve our town and our neighboring communities? And in the same way, as Kit and I got serious about whether to apply as co-pastors, we had our questions too. At first, of course, many of them arose out of that fear of doing something new and different. We had each been ministers in our own churches for almost a decade, and we wondered, how were we going to share our authority? How would we make sure that we kept enough of a balance in our lives, that we found joy in our marriage and our work? And I don't think I'm being dramatic when I say that our discernment was a serious back and forth for those first few weeks. We almost voted ourselves in and out of existence once or twice. But we read and talked and made lists and prayed. And each time we interviewed with the search committee at First Parish Lincoln, each time we talked to that group of 7 people, the more we realized that, the more we understood more about the central commitments and character of your church. And the more we realized that these commitments to build community, to foster spiritual growth of all kinds, and to pursue social justice, and to preserve the living earth, these were the values that informed the heart of our ministry too. And these were things that we brought different gifts to help live out. So by the time that spring was touching down in Massachusetts, the tone of Kit's and my questions about this co-pastorship had started changing. Yes, by that point, we were asking, how might our individual gifts complement one another in worship planning and meetings? How might both our voices in the pulpit, along with a robust lay leadership at First Parish Lincoln, contribute to a testimony, a spiritual testimony that represented the diversity of our society in 2022? How much could we learn from this congregation? How much might we surprise ourselves? How much fun could we have? I want to end with a few reflections on what makes for a dynamic partnership. One great thing, right, about Ruth's story is that it reminds us that we stumble into partnerships in all sorts of different ways, don't we? Whether it's an in-law who ends up as a companion, whether it's a dog walking partner who turns out to be the best listener you've ever met, whether it's a best friend who just happens to live on a different continent, whether it's a colleague who brings out the best of you in your work. In all these cases, I think, partnership requires at least a few recognizable ingredients. And Gwendolyn Brooks's poem and the book of Ruth offer us the foundation of a pretty solid recipe. First, in any partnership, we need commitment. We need the kind of sacrifice that Ruth embodies. We need a willingness to move beyond what makes us comfortable. I don't know if you noticed, but there was a reason why Gwendolyn Brooks used that word warning. That word warning was in her poem, wasn't it? A vibrant partnership is going to move us out of our comfort zones. And First Parish Lincoln, your history and your mission offer us some helpful ingredients for our recipe as well. In a true partnership, I think we need difference. True partnership actually thrives on difference. A diversity of spiritual commitments and curiosities is what makes things interesting in a congregation. And in partnership, we need patience. Remember, it took 7 years for First Parish to move from that trial period of worshiping together to the actual vote in 1942 that united the two churches. And certainly as Kit and I get adjusted to our new role as co-pastors, at times we will lean upon your patience. Yes, we have a plan for our weekly work schedule, for sharing committee leadership and staff supervision. We have outlines and handouts, but it is bound to take us a little time to get into the flow of co-pastoring together. And so we thank you in advance for that patience. And the last ingredient, the final ingredient I might lift up, is something that I hear both in Ruth's and Gwendolyn Brooks's words. And it's certainly something that we have both felt strongly in the presence of First Parish Lincoln. I want to call it an openness to mystery, a desire to be guided by what Richard Rohr might call the dance of the divine, what Mary Oliver might call what is most wild and precious. What Ruth embodies for me more than anything else is that willingness to step into the unknown, to say yes and continue saying yes, following the sacred clues as they unfold. One of the partnerships that I am most proud of in my ministry so far is a project that evolved into something called the Black Home Ownership Reparations Fund. This Home Ownership Reparations Fund began as a single conversation between two members of my previous church in California. And now, a year and a half later, thanks to donations from dozens of churches, community organizations, banks, realtors, anonymous strangers, the fund has raised $250,000 to assist Black families seeking to purchase homes in the Bay Area. Conversations about some reparations project began back in the summer of 2020. So many of us, right, were looking for a concrete way to respond after the murder of George Floyd and the protests in our city streets. But you know what? The only way this idea could have gotten off the ground, the only way that it could have survived all the committee meetings, all the fears and doubts that we bring to something new, was because the seeds of a real partnership had already been planted. See, a few years earlier, Kit and I had organized a joint Good Friday worship service during Lent. We brought together our two congregations along with 5 more, and we prayed and sang together. And that service was a hit. And then the following year, about 5 more churches wanted to join us. Each year we would collect a special offering for some social justice cause. All of which is to say, our group of small but mighty churches in the Bay Area had already been saying yes to each other. We'd already been building a partnership. And so in the summer of 2020, when protests broke out and Black Lives Matter signs went up on churches and long overdue racial justice groups started forming, and 2 people approached their pastor with an idea, because our spiritual communities had already been saying yes to each other, because there was a partnership in place, I knew just the group of people to get in touch with. And they knew people, and their people knew people. And now hundreds of individuals, people inside the church and people who will never set foot in a church in their lives, have contributed to this project. and the small measure of justice that it represents. Just a few weeks ago, we received an email announcing the first 2 applications had been received from Black families looking to purchase homes. These families will have their futures changed. There are so many connections waiting for us. There are so many surprises ready to move us out of our comfort zones. There are so many ways of sharing our gifts together. When we start to say, where you go, I will go. When we live as if the poet's words were true, that we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. Amen. We're going to continue in worship now as we remain muted and sing together our closing hymn, God Who Stretched the Spangled Heavens. Remaining muted, please join me in saying our call to ministry. We go forth from the worship of God to be faithful to the vision of Jesus, to affirm each person's dignity, and to cherish the living earth.
Before we offer a final benediction blessing, we just have to thank again both all of you for your flexibility and presence this morning, and especially those leaders who midwifed us into this morning, the search committee chairs, the worship planning team, and everyone who made this morning happen. We want to thank you all for sticking with us in this, COVID-induced bump in the road of our candidating week, and we hope that the rest of the journey when we pick it up will be a little smoother. So please stay on after following the postlude for the first opportunity to ask us some questions.
And when we do all go forth, first into a little time apart and then into the discernment of the rest of our candidating week, picking up on May 16th, may we do so remembering that our best selves can be brought out by other people, and the way in which the Spirit of life, the God of love, dreams up connections and builds bridges we couldn't have imagined.
And may the love of the Holy One bless you and keep you.
May that love make her face to shine upon you.
May that love be merciful unto you and grant you peace today and always. Amen.
Before we begin the Q&A, we have time for announcements. I think that there are two that I know of. Yeah, go ahead.
It's Robert de Normandy. Just want to remind folks that on the 24th of this month, we'll have a memorial service at the parish house in memory of Kenton Ide, who passed away a few weeks ago at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. We hope you'll all come and remember this longtime member of the church.
We will now move into the Q&A section of this morning. And I just reiterate what Reverends Kit and Nate have said. Thank you, everybody, for being here this morning and participating in the worship service. This morning's Q&A is really meant to answer general questions. As you know, candidating week starts a week from tomorrow on the 16th, and there are lots of open houses and committee meetings and opportunities to be with the candidates in smaller containers and in-person containers. So this morning is really intended to offer time for general questions. And what I would ask is that you could type your questions into the chat, or you could raise your hand, and I'm going to do my best to call on you, but I'm looking at multiple screens, so be patient. But before we do that, while you're formulating your questions, I'm just going to turn things over to Reverends Kit and Nate for some introductory comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I was thinking about partnership and mutuality all week, and I thought there had to be some joke to make about partnership and getting COVID, and did I really have to get it once Kit already had it, but I couldn't figure out a way to fit that one in. But
I appreciate the solidarity. Anyway,
as I mentioned in my sermon, you know, we have gone through this really powerful discernment process that's brought us to this point, and we're so excited to think about the opportunity to serve in co-ministry at First Parish Lincoln. Besides the core values of your church that I lifted up in my sermon, we've also been impressed by the work of the transition team and the strategic planning team to identify potential areas of focus in our collaborative ministry going forward. And I just wanted to say, you know, as our ministry takes shape, of course, we imagine relying on collaboration between the parish committee and other church leaders to help establish the priorities of our ministry.
yeah, so we just, before we launch into questions and answers, we want to just speak for a few more minutes generally about sort of our vision for co-ministry at FPL. In short, we hope, we dream, we envision a leadership style which would have us leading from a place of mutuality and collaboration, both internally as we work together to share a position as co-ministers, but also in partnership with all of you as a congregation, as leaders. We have a plan, as Nate mentioned, a starting point for how we plan to divvy up some of the core responsibilities of this settled pastor position, which includes dividing some areas of oversight to be kind of primarily one of ours or the others. And then there will be things like worship leadership, where, you know, in candidating week, Nate is preaching this first Sunday and I will preach on the 22nd, and we will follow sort of a rhythm of rotating, which I think will free up energy for each of us, so that the person who's preaching one week is free to focus on that. Both of us might be available for pastoral care, but the non-preacher will be really poised to respond to, say, an emergency that comes up that week. So we think there will be a whole lot of benefits, both for us in terms of sustainability for what we hope, if we are all in, that we hope it will be a long and fruitful ministry together. So we're excited about the way that this partnership will create sustainability, both internally and then together with the congregation. We want to mention, as many of you have heard, you know, we are both from the United Church of Christ background. And I just want to lift up how excited we are to be entering into this stage with a congregation that values spiritual diversity. You know, the UCC has a lot of diversity within itself theologically, and we come from two churches most recently in the Bay Area, which were very theologically diverse. Although they identified as being Christian, we are very familiar with folks of all traditions and all identifications, and that's something that really is important to us and is exciting to us. As we went through discernment, we got really excited about the creativity to be able to choose from texts that are sacred in in all kinds of ways through poetry and other works. So to us, that feels like a wide open door as we look forward to what we hope would be a long ministry. So I think that's enough up top, but we'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions or curiosities as we start to get to know one another.
Thank you both. So if you have a question, you can like raise your hand this way, or there's like I think that reactions button. I don't know. There's somewhere to raise your hand. I don't know. Or you can type it in the chat. That's really safe. All right, I'm scrolling. I don't see any hands. There must be a question. This is how you know your opening remarks have been very thorough. Great, here we have a lovely question. Thank you, Jen Morris. What were some of the other churches in the Bay Area that worked on your partnership efforts? Are you, Jen, referring to the partnership that Nate talked about this morning, or a different, where are you? I can't find you.
Yes, sorry, I can't find
Yeah.
my buttons either.
There, great.
So, yeah, I was thinking about, what was the range of faith traditions that you'd work with, like that whole question of how you can partner with different kinds of communities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, partnering with a sort of interfaith partnerships, and what kinds of faiths were involved in those interfaith partnerships.
Yeah, right.
Thanks for that, Jen. Yeah, so starting with that specific project I was referring to, that was started out by this sort of relationship that we built among 10 or 11 churches. I believe there was a Unitarian church involved. And then what was really cool about it was the way it really just caught wind, and the sails opened, and we started hearing from a whole bunch of different types of communities,
Different denominations,
temples, Jewish communities, and then beyond that, city organizations. Speaking more broadly, I also had a chance to work really closely with a community of faith, a Muslim community of faith in the Bay Area, that, we did service projects together. We presented lectures to each other's communities, and that was really meaningful as well. We didn't partner on this reparations project in particular, but
I think some of the cross-cultural cross-pollination that happened was really beautiful. So we did start with partnering with other United Church of Christ congregations, but really there weren't a lot of active connections at that point. So I'm thinking of primarily Japanese United Church of Christ congregation right next to Berkeley. And then there was the city that was called Sycamore UCC. There was a congregation called City of Refuge UCC, which is a nationally renowned, primarily African-American, LGBTQ affirming congregation in Oakland. So more of an inner city congregation with really vibrant worship. And so when we came together and made that first Good Friday worship service, we had sort of beautiful cross-cultural exchanges that created a context to explore some of these themes in a way that was had a lot of integrity. And
Great. The next question, and this is from Paula Waterman, who actually is the current chair of our deacons, asking, what has been your experience with deacons in your ministry?
Yeah, we've both really enjoyed working with deacons. We've, between the two of us, so we've been at this nearly a decade. Between the two of us, we've served a lot of congregations, including seminary. It's upwards of 8 or 9, something like that. So we have many models for the role of deacons. I know that the deacons at FPL are really spiritual leaders of the congregation, and we have experience with governance where that is really the case. I'm thinking of, I served a large church at my first call in Des Moines, Iowa, where the deacons really were a strong, robust governing body sort of for both worship and spiritual life. So we look forward to turning to and working with deacons. Do you have, I don't know, other?
No, just to add on to that, I mean, one of the things that really stood out to us about First Parish is the active role that lay leaders play in the worship service, you know, in the way that Katie today led us in prayers, and we got to hear representations of the sacred through a bunch of different voices. And that's one of the things that stood out to us right away about your church. And I think that speaks to the strength of the Deacons program. So I think we look forward to collaborating.
Yeah, I think we're both used to like that collaborative mode where we might have an idea for worship and say, come from a place of curiosity, working with deacons and other leaders, like, what if we did this? What do you think about this? And that feels like a model we would continue with for sure.
Wonderful. We have a couple of questions centered around youth and children. The first is from Charlie Cook, who is one of our younger members, asking, will children be joining us on Sundays and if your children will be joining us for Sundays and for children's events? I think Zoe was pretty cute. Anybody would object to having Zoe join us?
She demanded to be a part of that children's moment. So that moment for all ages. Yes, we are definitely planning on one of the things we're excited about is, as we imagined co-ministering, was to have our whole family as part of the community. So yeah, our daughters are Zoe, who's about to turn 4, and Gwendolyn, who's 1.5. They are being occupied right now so that they don't join us, hopefully during this Q&A. But yes, when everyone is healthy and we have enough hands to help, we're excited to introduce them to you all. And
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. And next question is, this is from Sarah Cannon Holden, what thoughts do you have for encouraging, this is the $1 million question, for encouraging greater participation of children in Sunday school?
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. This is certainly something that we've talked about with the search committee and talked about between ourselves. And you know, I think my initial instinct in answering right now is to say that we try a lot of different things, and we recognize the particular, I want to say, challenges and opportunities of Sunday school religious education here in 2022, you know, after these 2 really difficult years, and then with the uncertainty, right, that our future still represents. We have skin in the game. We have an interest in building a robust RE program. And when I say try a lot of different things, I really mean get creative in terms of meeting families where they're at, do a lot of listening to what the families need so that we're not just laying out a bunch of stuff and expecting people to show up. What would you add?
Yeah, I would say, you know, we come definitely from a place of shared experience with frankly, the burnout a lot of young families are feeling. And so meeting folks where they are and seeing what people really need, what would be nourishing to their spirit. And then sometimes, you know, I think there is sort of a cultural shift as we move into a different world where spiritual community may take different shapes or have different forms, but there's ways of talking about like form and meaning, and the meaning can still be there, but perhaps, like Nate was saying, trying different forms so that perhaps, I don't know, I'm pretty invested in Sunday morning, but that's not necessarily the hierarchical only way to connect, or that if there's other ways of really meaningfully engaging and transforming people's lives, that those are just as valuable, you know. And so sometimes changing some of the metrics to notice lives transformed, people's lives touched, and hopefully some of those families will either join or get more invested, but they may be connected in a different way. And so, yeah, more to say about that. That's something that we're both really interested in, both from a personal perspective and from the perspective of vitality for the church going forward. So more to be revealed, but thank you so much for all the questions around that. I think it's really
Excellent.
important.
And just sort of building off of that, and then after this question, I'm going to go to Peter Pease, who I think had a raised hand, followed by Ken Hurd, who had a raised hand. But the question first, just because it's so related, is around youth ministry. So not just the children, but thinking about sort of the teen and young adult. What is your experience in that? And what are your thoughts about developing plans and ways to meet with different age kids?
Yeah, one of the things we both love about ministry, so both of us have been generalist ministers, at least in a large part in most of our roles, is we love different ages. So we are fully committed from birth through the whole life cycle. That's one of the joys of congregational life, and youth is a huge part of that. We both have worked with youth in a number of contexts. I'm trained as an OWL teacher our whole lives, which is the comprehensive sexuality education that I know you are all invested in as well. I've had the opportunity to teach that for middle and high school youth in 2 different congregational settings. And so I would be excited to connect with that program and see, ways to encourage that blossoming, which is clearly already happening. I think we would come in rather than having a wholesale plan to unfurl around any of these particular program areas like youth ministry, is we would want to do a lot of listening and a lot of questions and a lot of asking what has worked, what has been not so life-giving, what could we try next? And of course, that will be partnering with whoever comes in after Margaret into this interim position. So that's one of the areas that I'm planning to take the primary lead on for at least the first calendar year, but is something that we would be both very invested in. Yeah.
And Kit, I've been scrolling the chat, so I don't know that you mentioned some of your work with young adults, which feels relevant to our high school set.
Yes, that does. So my role in Berkeley was a generalist associate minister, but actually I was there for about 6 years. The first year and a half or so, I was specifically called as a young adult minister. I did, full ministry, but I did have one of my arenas of focus, my portfolio focused on young adults. So the church I served was just kitty corner from the UC Berkeley campus, or CAL as they call it. And so I had the opportunity to work really, really closely with college students, graduate students, and other young professionals. One of the fun things I got to do was help co-create a alternative Wednesday evening worship service that was based around storytelling and creative music offering. And yeah, it was really kind of one of the fun things I got to explore. So I have a personal interest in the young adult set, but that also connects absolutely with bridging the gap from high school to kind of young families. There's sometimes a gap in terms of how the church can meet folks where they are.
Great, thank you. I can't remember whether I said Ken or Peter was going to go next, but one of you. Who is next? Peter.
Hi
go.
there. I was just going to ask you about your engagement in other faith traditions, and you've already answered that so well, but I was going to emphasize the importance of, in our community, of going across so many lines. We love doing that, and it's just one of the richest and deepest things that we enjoy doing together. But you've already answered the question, so thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Ken, did you want to ask, is your question still out there?
It is, and Nate and Ken, I think it's great that you have thought so much about co-pastoring, and I'm looking forward to what you bring to First Parish. But I was curious if you've talked to other folks who've done this, and if you with the idea of drawing from their experience of what might be the ups and downs of doing this. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, great question. And yeah, we were fortunate to have, way back in divinity school, two of our mentors were co-pastors in the neighborhood where we were in graduate school, Bill and Maria. So they were the first real model of co-pastors who we really connected with, and that got us starting to think about maybe someday we'll be able to do this. And along the years in our ministry, we've come across, I don't know, 10 or so other couples, and to be honest, some folks weren't cut out for it. And I think that was a learning lesson for us as well, where it really does feel like it needs to be the right fit. We're so fortunate now, our home church, which is in Wellesley, Mass, is being served by a co-pastor couple right now, Rick and Jill Edens, and they have really become listening ears for us over this last year as we've entered into discernment. So,
and they've been co-pastors for 40 years, so they have a little bit of experience. Yeah.
So it's been great to have these people that we can reach out to and lean on, because it is a unique way of doing leadership.
Yeah.
And so we'll continue to reach out to them, with questions large and small.
I'm also part of a network called the Young Clergy Women International Network that has a special subgroup for clergy couples, mostly in the US. But it's sort of a niche audience, but there is a connection. So I've been creating a best practices document just with kind of tips and tricks and experiences. And we have another Zoom being set up with some co-pastors in Pennsylvania who are more of our contemporaries and, have been at it 5 or so years. So I think it's going to be really helpful for us to have a diversity of experiences and voices. And it feels like we really do have some support of people we can go to and say, from logistical things like, what do you think about having a joint email, for some communications, to bigger picture stuff, like what are some sustainable practices for protecting your time with your family, but also being fully present to the congregation? So from top to bottom, yeah, we're grateful that we're not on the adventure alone.
Right.
Right. There are a couple of questions related to sort of your past experience. One quick one, I think, is from Adam Bailey. Why did you leave the Bay Area?
Yeah, it was hard to leave, as anybody would know who spent time there, but it was also really the right time for us. We grew up here in Massachusetts, and the plan always was to settle down back here. We're fortunate enough that both of our parents are still around and doing well, and that was always the goal, to raise our kids closer to our parents.
Yeah, so it was a long-term plan that the urgency took on a new level during the pandemic. To be honest, we added another family member. Our daughter Gwendolyn was born. I don't know if you remember September 2020. So right in the thick of the pandemic, there was a day where the wildfire smoke covered the Bay Area so much that the sun never rose. And that was the day our daughter Gwendolyn was born. So there was just some dynamics of, we are ready for some fresh air and some family support and a next chapter. Yeah, so a lot of dynamics, but we were ready to move on professionally too. And we feel really lucky. It was a leap of faith though. We said we're gonna move first and hope and trust that the next professional thing will unfold. So it was a leap of faith, and here we are.
Great. Another question from Tucker and R.L. Smith. How large were the churches you were involved with in Berkeley? And maybe not just Berkeley, but how large? So size experience, particularly on the large side, it seems like there's interest.
Yeah, so I have primarily worked as the sole pastor of churches ranging from 250 members to 75 members. So my church in California, the most recent one, I think we had 75 or 80 members.
And many of them added during your tenure there.
Yeah.
I've served as an associate at 2 larger churches. So that's kind of one of the places where our experience, we think, really complements each other well, as Nate's had this experience in the senior role in a slightly smaller community size scale. The first church I served was a bit of a anomaly in the United Church of Christ. It's over 2,000 member congregation in Des Moines, Iowa. It's called Plymouth Church, which actually, similarly in, I believe it was the 1940s,
Right.
was formed from multiple congregations coming together, which was part of the vibrancy that continued there. So a church in Des Moines, I think there were 6 or 7 pastors on staff. So I got to learn from a whole lot of senior colleagues in that setting.
They had their own parking garage.
We don't have that here.
But it was cool. It was a really different experience. And that was part of it was like a fellowship for new pastors in their first call. So the plan was always to be there just 2 years. And then I served First Congregational Church of Berkeley, California. And that was about a 400 member church.
Thank you. There is another question, and it's because it's come up in a few places, and I know you somewhat answered it, but maybe it'd be helpful just because it takes us a few times to hear things. But Ralph Smith has asked, do you draw upon a variety of spiritual teaching and traditions in your ministry? So a slightly different twist on that multi-faith question, if you could address that.
Sure. Thanks for that, Ralph. Yeah, I think that's really one of the things that excited us and attracted us about First Parish Lincoln. We've always been sort of wide, voracious readers. And so I think in our preaching and our pastoral care and our ministries, we've always been interested in ways of incorporating different voices, different spiritual traditions. And we haven't had the chance before to be preaching in a place where we can bring in readings from these other sources.
We would bring in poems and definitely ideas from other traditions, but the infrastructure, right, in terms of kind of holding sacred readings on the same level, is new. We both influenced by all kinds of faiths and traditions. I think Buddhism is a place where I personally, from a contemplative, meditative perspective, have been influenced and in dialogue with. Nate and I actually had the opportunity in college through our chapel at the University of Chicago, where we spent 10 days in Tibet visiting Buddhist monasteries. That was a long time ago, but was a really formative experience. And including the highest monastery in the world at Everest Base Camp. So that's kind of a cool fact, but I think just illustrates, we love to travel, we love to read. We absolutely, are invested in a wide variety of sources, and we hope to keep growing. That's another thing that really drew us and draws us to this community and position, is a place where we could feel like our own faith, our own spiritual nourishment would continue to grow for years to come.
Great, thank you. And here's a very more specific question from Catherine Levin. Would you be open to having small group meetings on Zoom to discuss our various thoughts and proposals for ways to reach out and include young adults in church activities and in worship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Zoom, gifts and challenges, but one of the things the pandemic has given us is we're all pretty adept at Zoom. So yeah, I think that's something like that is a great idea. Not this week. But absolutely, yes, I think those are great ideas.
Wonderful. There's a couple of things that are less questions, but more comments that I'm going to read. And if you have, I think we're sort of the energies sort of questioning out, but if you have one, raise that hand or put something in the chat. But while I read these couple, one is from Hawa Ibrahim. Reverend Kit and Nate made me joyful and happy. Zoe was really cute. Thank you and welcome. And I'm not sure are Eden, I don't know. Perhaps it will interest you to learn that the benediction you presented was one often used by Reverend Styron, the first minister to lead FPL in the early 40s. Just so everybody knows that. And then Joan Mansfield, who says, as the current OWL teacher, she's very excited to hear, Reverend Kit, that you have the experience to know what a great program it is for our community. So I think that covers everything I've got in the chat. Does anybody want to put their hand in the air or put their fingers on their keys? And if I'm missing you, you might just unmute and ask your question, because this is hard on multiple screens. Great. Well, thank you, everybody, and especially thank you to Reverends Kit and Nate for rising above COVID throughout the house to be with us in such a beautiful and generous and joyful way this morning. Just so everybody's clear, candidating week starts on the 16th, a week from Monday. There's lots of ways to meet Reverends Kit and Nate. You can find materials in the parish news, on the e-news, on the search webpage. And just one little plug, we're looking for a lot of cake on the 22nd of May. A lot of cake. We've talked about spiritual diversity a couple of times here. We want the variety of cakes to reflect our spiritual diversity. So there's links all over the place to sign up and bring a cake. So just all makers and bakers, get your kids involved. This is a great opportunity for young adults, teens, everybody. All right, that's what I've got. So thank you all for being here this morning. A very happy Mother's Day and celebration of partnership in all ways. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We're really looking forward to the next steps of the journey.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you. Great to be with you.
Thank you.